one Star Wars show out of how many are there? 8,000 or whatever. It's like, okay, you have a lesbian woman directing it. There's a trans person in it. There's a non-binary person in it. They maybe get like 10 seconds of screen time. We have no idea. Maybe one of them's a main character. Is that really like a thing to be making like 10 videos about before it's out and acting and really drumming up your audience and getting everybody kind of in this weird sort of like, they're after you and they're after your kids sort of mentality? I think that's a little historically harmful, maybe not a great sort of vibe for people to be in, especially when there's a lot of like crazy impressionable people that these people kind of know are probably in their audience too. I don't think it's doing a lot of good, but
as a Lion King porn enjoyer, you can't escape incest. Even if you don't like it, there's only a few characters in the movie.
Yeah.
They're all related.
That's true.
But here's my out.
Go on.
Here's my out. In the special edition 3D Blu-ray, they added an extra scene at the end where they showed the lion characters performing as actors. They had a fake blooper reel. So there's like Mufasa like flubbing his lines, and there's like Scar flubbing his lines.
Grow up and tell them who's... I don't know what I'm doing.
So I'm like, oh,
But
okay.
it's like,
So canonically,
it's the
they're
lions,
not related. The lions
are actors.
The lions are actors playing
Gotcha.
characters. Canonically, I can enjoy the porn without it being incest. They're just acting.
Weird.
So why I missed one on Destiny's podcast? Most of it was just them talking about various movie opinions. And of course they got around to talking about wokeness and politics and media. And say exactly what you think they'll say. Which is basically the Principal Skinner meme, except for replace kids with the majority.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
Now of course the woke and woke sympathizers will say that the anti-woke are the delusional ones, despite for the longest time denying that there was a problem. Then after they couldn't deny it anymore after Hollywood's continuous failures, then they had to pivot to it's just bad execution, which sort of reminds me of when sugar companies said that the increase in obesity had nothing to do with sugar, but with the lack of moderation and not enough exercise, despite that not being the case in previous periods. In any case, I would like to go through what they said and give my 2 cents.
How do you feel about the politicization of movies? Macro, micro, and then you can speak. So macro-wise, obviously talking about the politicization of anything is kind of silly because like you said, what is art? Well, what is politics? Everything is kind of political, whether you're bucking a social norm or reinforcing it, you're always doing something in some cultural context.
Boys have a penis, girls have a vagina.
You're transphobe.
It seems like if I point to, as an example I use a lot, if I look at like women characters in films, it feels like in the past there have been movies that have women leads who do a really good job at that, but it felt like it wasn't the explicit goal of the director or the artists to make that like a political statement. They just happen to be there. So like Sigourney Weaver as Ripley in Alien, or Kill Bill, and like these are like good examples of lead females who are just in awesome movies doing awesome things. And then you've got other movies where it feels a little bit more intentional. So whatever the woman is that the quartering hates in Captain Marvel, he's made like 50 million, 50 million videos about her. Or the like Star Wars, the new trilogy or whatever with that female lead, where it feels like a little bit more of a political statement. So you've got movies that feel like they're trying to make stronger political statements in our current culture. And then you've got now this kind of like YouTube movie reviewer culture that's very politically oriented. Where there are certain movies that I watch and I could tell just because there's like a gay character or just because there's a type of character, I know there's someone on YouTube that's gonna be really mad about it.
Am I drunk or did it feel like Destiny almost had the right idea for a second, then completely did a 180? I mean, he literally had it. In the past, it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like the creatives pushing an agenda. Now it does. And the anti-woke are calling it out. Not only because as a whole it's terrible, because if it were financially successful, while it would be sad, at least in that case it would just be giving the audience what they wanted. But that isn't even happening. The god-awful trash they make can't even break even. Disney is in the toilet. Same for Warner Brothers and many of the other studios. And when we point this out, and point out all the examples of woke nonsense, in front of and behind the camera, then people like you point and say that we're the one making it political. I mean, this is insanity.
about it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that environment in general?
It's a funny new environment that we're in, and I find it kind of amusing that like a lot of the people that scream the loudest about not wanting politics in their films are the ones injecting, like making them explicitly political with how they're engaging with it, especially with the amount of these channels that make 10 videos in a row about a movie that's not even out yet, but just like the person who directed like a lesbian woman, and she said that she liked Frozen because there wasn't like a male love story. It's like, wait, that's not. Blah, 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 blah.
Sometimes when I listen to these people,
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
Hollywood is the one making it political.
I didn't create this situation, I'm dealing with it.
Which, yes, if you weren't a leftist, you would find that quote cringe. But that's besides the point. So Star Wars used to be the largest and most influential franchise in the history of cinema. So kind of a big deal. So cut to now after paying billions of dollars for said franchise. And after creating one of the worst trilogies in history, ruining Obi-Wan and Boba Fett through terrible TV shows, it's basically circling the drain. Which, considering Disney as a whole is doing the same thing, you'd think they'd want to pull out all the stops at this point to save their brand and their studio. And what have they done? Your movie sucks. They're making a Rey movie, which is insane. The actress's career and Rey as a character is on life support, with a director that has never directed anything to this point that indicates she can create a successful Star Wars film. Her two most acclaimed films are short film documentaries, and Acolyte, a Star Wars show that has been in production for 4 years. You give that to a woman who's once again done nothing, that says she can create a successful Star Wars show. I mean, look at her IMDb. Nothing but rom-coms. And yet Kathleen Kennedy, who's destroyed the brand of both Star Wars and Indiana Jones, yet still has a job. Am I painting a good enough picture for you? Your movie sucks? What does this level of incompetence say? Either Disney, the second largest media conglomerate in the world, just decided after all their success in previous years to go brain dead. Or, and I know this is a wacky idea, perhaps maybe it has something to do with politics. Maybe not firing the woman that has a major role in ruining Star Wars has something to do with politics. Maybe hiring Leslie Headland and the Rey director has something to do with politics, and not their filmography that makes Brett Ratner's look like Martin Scorsese. But call me crazy, your movie sucks.
And then you search for like a trailer of like one of these new, it's always like Star Wars and Marvel. And it seems like most of the films that they experience and their entire language of how they view film is only through the lens of Star Wars and Marvel, which is also another frustrating thing.
It's not just us saying movies suck nowadays. It's little-known directors like Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino. I mean, your movie sucks. Where would you put the last 10 years? In movie history, where would it stack up? Would you put it ahead of the 70s or 90s? Also, with people talking about mainstream blockbuster movies, which again we can stack up with periods of the past. If Jaws and Star Wars were the first in the 70s, I would say this is definitely the worst time for blockbuster filmmaking.
Because, you know, maybe not all of them, but definitely some of them, you know, they have this sort of mantra of like, oh, movies are bad now, when in reality also there's a bit of like, you know, a perception bias because films from the past, you know, there was if you look on Wikipedia and you just look at the entire list of movies released within the year, like notable movies released within the year, go to like 1996, right? You'll find a bunch of shit that was just trash, forgotten, cynical, lazily made, no personality, no soul. But we remember the ones that are special. And just like the films in this generation, we remember the ones that are special. We remember the films that connect with people in ways that break the norms, or ways that you know, might even be reinforcing some norms, but do something that people really, really jive with.
Yes, and your point is, can we not look at those films and tally up the amount of these types of films that people really jive with and say, wow, the last 10 years compared to the previous decades, the number is decidedly less, which would mean that films compared to the past aren't up to snuff, especially when you talk about the mainstream stuff. But we couldn't do that, because that would mean maybe there's a problem, and Your Movie Sucks can't admit that. And if he can, it definitely won't be because of wokeness. Definitely not.
But everybody's entitled to their own opinion. And there's a lot of these films that wind up sucking anyway. You know, you wouldn't catch me being like, oh, whatever what most of these shows that they take issue with are just shit shows anyway, and shit movies, but not because there's a trans person in it, and not because there's a woman in it. It's because they're creatively bankrupt, and the exact same ideas I was talking about earlier, where they have no faith in artists and they have faith in IPs. That's exactly what they're doing. That's why all of these shows that they're doing this with are Marvel and Star Wars, is because historically they can look at certain demographics. They can look at the fact that there is an appetite to want to see more women in movies. There is an appetite for a certain portion of the crowd to want to see more people of color in movies. There's some appetite that exists to want to see representation of trans people or non-binary. That's not happening to every show. It's happening to a small fraction of shows, some of those being pre-existing IPs of big names that, like, I guess a lot of people are very emotionally attached to in a nostalgic way. But it's...
YMS is just rambling at this point. It's like he's in quicksand trying to grab for anything to make his worldview make sense. They're creatively bankrupt. Okay, but how does that explain their recent massive drop in quality? Marvel created one of the most successful cinematic franchises of all time, and Phase 1 through 3 in totality was pretty damn good. Phase 4 and 5 are so bad they make the weaker entries of past phases look like masterpieces. What happened? I ask these people like, your movie sucks this question. This isn't over the last 30 years. It's literally pre and post 2016, and the quality falls off the face of the earth. From Pixar to Star Wars to Marvel to Star Trek to James Bond. Pretty much every franchise has posted all-time lows. What happened? The anti-woke say it's because of woke ideology, where the progressive messages and identity politics take precedent over the art, as well as DEI and ESG policies. And what do the brilliant Destiny and Your Movies Suck answer? Well, movies are just bad now. Corporations are creatively bankrupt, and studio heads just out of the fucking blue forgot how to make films.
Is that what it is? Is that the best you've got?
Again, you would have said this before 2016, that they're creatively bankrupt. What changed? And if they're creatively bankrupt, wouldn't they just do the incredibly obvious thing and just adapt the decades and decades of comic book stories and characters you have? Literally take just the most popular and well-received comics and just adapt them. Same with the Star Wars expanded universe. That seems like the logical safe choice, the one that would make them the most money. You already have a built-in audience. But no, they're so creatively bankrupt they would rather not do that and make up their own stuff. Why, it's almost like they'd rather take a property, a character, and a story, and tell their own story, so they can spread their message, their ideology. And as far as demographics, you're gonna make the case that appealing to women or minorities or trans people is what these corporations do? Again, Marvel was the biggest thing ever appealing who they appealed to, which was the majority of comic book fans. And when things turned to shit after Endgame, which I'm guessing you think they made the change appealing to the minority, wouldn't you say that was a huge mistake, considering the sorry state they're in now? I mean, that logically follows, right?
The Barbie movie was the highest grossing film of last year. It beat the Mario movie. That was like the most feminist woke shit ever. And so obviously there's an appetite for it. But what the Barbie movie did well is they trusted in actual artists like Noah Baumbach, like Greta Gerwig, right? These two that created this film from their own ideas and were allowed to essentially do what they wanted with, I'm sure, some notes.
The reason Barbie was successful is real simple. It appealed to its built-in audience. Barbie is a girl's brand. It appealed to women. That's why it was successful. What an insane concept. Appealing to the majority of what your brand is, instead of trying to change it to appeal to a minority that for one mostly doesn't give a shit about that brand, like in the case of Star Wars or Marvel. So you point to one film that is successful because it appealed to its base, not because it appealed to trans or minorities. And that is your evidence that woke is not broke? It's because they didn't try and force Barbie into something it wasn't, like they do with everything else.
But not necessarily just trying to recreate the success of, like, let's do Star Wars, but it's a woman, or let's do Marvel, but it's a girl power movie. It's the creative bankruptcy that is causing these issues, not the fact that there's any sort of representation.
Representation, again, isn't the problem. Again, we've had representation for a long time. Why specifically now is Hollywood sucking so hard at it? It's almost like they're putting the message ahead of the art, where execution and integration of ideas and representation is an afterthought, and ESG and DEI policies, which is what we're complaining about.
I think that's what drives me the craziest when it comes to like the very political analyses of really of anything. It can be it can even be of political things when people have their particular lens they look through. But yeah, like if you make a Ghostbusters movie with an all-male cast and the movie kind of isn't that great, like Ghostbusters 2, like nobody would ever say, well, they fucked up because it was an all-male cast. But then if you make like the all-female Ghostbusters and you're like, well, this movie wasn't good, it's not because they didn't have good ideas or because it was, artistically bankrupt. It's because, well, it was because they picked women. And it's like, would men starring in that movie have made it any better? Like, is that really what we're running with?
It's not bad because they're women, but because that was the film they were trying to build around. Instead of writing a great story or script, they thought the idea of it being a female-led Ghostbuster film would do the heavy lifting, but unfortunately the audience doesn't care about that. We just want a compelling story and great comedy.
Well, all right, let's see it.
See what?
See the funny. Make me laugh. Go.
Go?
Go. Funny. 3, 2, 1.
Ghosts! They're real!
Lord have mercy. Jesus Christ.
Oh, whoa, whoa! Not so fast, muchacho. Take that business gun out of your mouth. Save it for later.
So to wrap this up, YMS and Destiny call the anti-woke basically ignorant for thinking Hollywood's recent output is bad because of wokeness. Because to them, the problem is creative bankruptcy and a lack of execution.
Oh, well, allow me to retort.
Couldn't you have made that critique at many points in the history of Hollywood, in which that doesn't properly describe the problem of recent Hollywood? In fact, you could say their critique is shallow, because before this period things were going good, and all you had to do was keep doing the status quo. Instead, something changed around 2016. Now, whatever you believe the source of the change was, the fact is something changed, and I think it makes more sense that wokeness, which is forcing far-left politics where they don't belong, which is into mainstream big-budget properties, which no one asked for, and trying to turn brands that were aimed towards boys and men into brands for everyone caused this. That seems like a hell of a lot better explanation of recent Hollywood than what YMS or Destiny are putting forth. But if that doesn't convince you, ask yourself if Hollywood was the inverse of what it is now, and after 2016 put out the conservative equivalent to woke into media. Are you gonna tell me that you wouldn't say the problem is media getting political, but that it's merely due to execution?
No way.
I don't believe you.